Aloha. So, after some technical difficulties, I'm continuing this recording on my phone. Unfortunately, everything up until this point was completely corrupted, and my computer no longer works. So, that's fun. But just to recap, um, I have this photo reference over on the side of the ko'olaus from H3. I have my line drawing that I used to transfer to this Arches watercolor, and I also have my my original like ink drawing of the photo reference. I am using mainly this lemon yellow or whatever cool yellow you have, phthalo blue, green shade, and both the quinacridone rose and some alizarin crimson, um, which maybe I would have just used the quinacridone rose, but whatever. So those are the colors I've used so far. Just kind of got various mixes here of those combinations. I think that's it. I may have used a touch of brown somewhere, but I don't remember where it was. That could have been from another project. Anyway, I mostly am using round brushes, but I do have a few more fluffy soft brushes available because these are really good for softening and blending. Okay, and those other ones I have a little bit more spring. Well, not now because they're kind of wet, but they're a little bit more springy. So let's see. I was almost done with this middle section that I was recording. Unfortunately, that was all lost, but I'm going to finish this up. Kind of this section right here. I was working on that, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of color testing. Try to get this just right. Okay, so I've got a little bit more blue for the shadows. I am going to show you, so this is already dry, right? I actually had gone, and right before my video on the previous section got ruined, I had gone back and I had to put some more lines in, and then I'd filled in this area, and then I looked at my reference drawing again, and I realized I wanted this darker section to come down a little bit more. So I just put clear water on there, and now I've got my blue color, bluish green color, and I'm going to fill this in a little bit more. I may have accidentally added an extra ridge in here, but it's not like anyone's going to notice, right? Okay, so I'm kind of going up into some of that dry area too. So now I don't necessarily want these sharp lines right here. I want this to fade down a little bit. So I've got this clean, damp brush. Not too wet. You kind of have to get a judge for how wet your brush is when you do this. Otherwise you could add too much water back into your painting. I'm dragging it along the edge here while it is still damp and brushing it on my rag and basically softening this hard edge right here. Let's see if I can drag some of that color down a little bit. Maybe not. Okay, because I'm going to put trees and foregrounds and stuff like that in there, right? So I don't really want to have that hard edge there. I'm going to come in here a little bit more. That edge ended up being a little bit too like perfectly curved, so I'm going to create a little variation in the edge there. Okay, and then let's see. I'm going to layer a little bit up here. Looking at my photo reference, I didn't quite get it as sharp as I would have liked the first go on this area where the sun strikes this side of the mountain and then it curves back over. It's a very sharp line where that happens. And then it fades to the side. So depending on the time of day that you have for your photo reference, or if you're drawing from real life, this can vary quite a bit. And then I don't really want to do this layer all the way over here because this is kind of cool. So I am just going to soften this edge over here and let it blend into the area I've already worked. Okay, so now that looks quite a bit more like I've got a couple different facets of this mountainside, right? So I think later on I will also probably take some warm yellow and do a glaze, a very, very thin layer over some of this area here, because this ends up being my focal point with all of this texture going on. The sun is hitting this side, so it's warmer. It's a warmer yellow. It's kind of late in the day in my reference photo. So all of that is going to lead my eye to this area. Okay, so I'm going to try to show you another section here. I'm going to pause and think a little bit here. Okay, so I'm going to do this area over here, which is in shadow in my reference photo. So it's also not really my focal point. It's kind of in front of my focal point. I don't want my eye to go to that so much. So this is going to be not as vibrant. I do want it to be dark though, because it will stand out against this area. So I've got a few different things to consider. I'm going to go ahead and wet this area I'm working on, which I'm also going to spray the back of my paper. You can always tape yours down, but when you're just practicing something and it's not a major painting, and you're not so worried about the buckling that can happen, just whatever. I don't tape it down all the time. Okay, so I'm wetting this area, and this is where those softer brushes come in handy because they will hold more water. You don't have to reload so much. So in my reference photo, this area is kind of obstructed by a monkey pod, and I don't really know what's going on. So I'm just gonna let it fade like I did this area and work with it later. Okay, I'm waiting for this paper to turn into a nice satiny sheen, and then that's an ideal time to add a whole bunch of stuff. In the meantime, I'm going to work on mixing and testing the colors I want over here. So at this point I have this puddle of like grayish, bluish, greenish stuff going on. Let's see what we get here. So it's nice to have a few different variations of the color. Oop, why did I do that? Okay, so I've got a little gray, a little bit more green, a little bit more blue. Maybe that worked out for me after all. And a little bit more of a reddish color, which may end up... That didn't do anything. Add a little bit more red. So I take my colors and I pull them over to a little corner of my mixing area. And then when I'm doing something like this, or testing colors, and I have a little mini puddle that I can pull from. Sometimes it's way too much, like that, but actually I do think I need to make a much bigger puddle here, so that's fine. That's fine. You can see as I'm going back and forth, it's making a couple variations as well. So I may have one that's a little bit more red over here, and then have one that's a little bit more blue over here, but it's still the same mixture of blue and red, just different variations of it. And I'm probably gonna need to get some of this yellow over here as well. Okay, so I might pull some of this green in, but that's really too bright. That's more of a center area green. So, but that was my base green color, just the lemon yellow color and the phthalo blue. So out of that, I've created various shades of things across my palette. Okay, so while I've been yapping, I think this little satiny sheen color has come about. So I want a nice sharp edge on this left side because I want it to stand out against that bright sunlit one. So the angle of your brush matters here. Pulling that thing down. This may not be as dark as I had hoped. But we can add some more darkness in there. Actually really don't know what's going on behind here because in my reference photo there's a monkey pod tree. So we're just making it up. Okay, so again, I'm gonna soften this area down here. Let's see. Sometimes you gotta clean your brush off after you've picked up so much. Okay, you can also come in and lighten some areas. I have a little section I want a little bit lighter. Okay, that's lifting, that's called lifting. My washer is about to take off for the moon. Okay, I hope you didn't hear that on video. It is, it's gone to colonize Mars. So anyways, I'm gonna add a little bit more deep blue in here. And it's gonna blend down into that wet area below. I should say it's a little bit more damp than wet if we were getting specific. Okay. Okay, it looks a little too smooth, so I'm just adding like a little bit of wiggles in there, I guess you could say. Let's add just a touch of more green in some areas. It's a little too blue. Okay, so I worked from lighter to darker as far as my saturation levels are. So my paint is getting thicker and thicker, in other words. this will help you prevent those cabbage blooms you might have read about, which some people like. That's totally fine, but you don't necessarily want them in every spot. It's just a style preference. I think they're kind of fun in backgrounds. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for now. Later, after this dries, what I'll probably do is add a little bit more texture because there's like this cliff face in here where these white areas are, where there's these like layers of rock that go horizontally, and so I'll mess with that later because this is going to be too damp. It's just going to blend into everything else around it right now. Okay, so let's go move over to this side, which normally I would say paint from the mountains that are farthest and back and work your way forward. So these are the farthest ones. So normally I would say do this one first and then do this one and then do this, but I was recording and so I thought I'd just get straight to the point to show you some blending and lifting techniques. So I went in with that one. But that's fine because sometimes you just forget to do things. So now I can show you what to do where we have this edge that we don't want to mess up and we want it to be really sharp, and then we have this more faded background area from this farther back range. So I'm going to scooch over. I'm going to try to zoom in on my phone. Hopefully you can see a little more. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a lighter shade of all this stuff on my palette. So I don't know if I can fit everything in here. Okay. Actually, I'm going to spray the back of this a little bit more. And by the way, I got this white board from Lowe's or Home Depot. They had this dry erase chalkboard stuff. It's like masonite, but then it has a coating on it. And so the other side is black and this side is white. But I found that it really helps keep these watercolors moist. Like in the past, I've had issues with some, like I just cut up boards that I got from there. And you couldn't totally wipe them clean. So sometimes they would stain the backside of your paper. And I like using both sides. If I'm like, I don't love this painting, flip it over, be able to use that side. So I wasn't really able to do that. It was kind of annoying. And then I noticed, I think there was acid or something in the wood boards because it was like changing color, like around the edge of my painting. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna quit this board thing. So I found this and it's been working beautifully. I do really like taping it down though because it will make it stay moister, make it stay more moist for a longer time when it's taped down and it has that coating on the surface. So anyways, let's see. Let's wet down. Let's see, it's still not on the screen. So hold on, let me adjust my camera. Okay, sorry. All right, so this whole area is the one I'm working in. So if you do have an area that you want to save some of those white highlights, you can try to get your brush at the optimal dampness level for sort of skipping your brush across the surface like that. And when you get at an angle, you can kind of see, oh, it misses some places. So you can do it with paint as well. Okay, so I'm getting really close to the edge of this mountain in front, but I'm trying not to touch it as much as possible. with this clear water. And I've got a more diluted bluish green, big old puddle over here, a little bit off screen. Okay, looks good. And again, there's a bunch of trees down here, so I'm just gonna show you how to fade that down to the bottom. So this is an area where you may have some hard edges and you may have some lost edges where it just turns a little fuzzy. That's a good technique to practice with clouds, trying to make some edges hard where the sunlight hits it and then soften them in various areas. Okay, let's see. So I've got some darker areas. And this area is so small. I'm not going to get too fidgety with if I got something exactly in the space that I drew before. It's going to spread out quite a bit. So that's why I didn't want to get right up next to this mountain ridge, because I knew it's still going to spread because I put that clear water down. It's still going to look like a mountain back there, and you can kind of see some of that coming in. So if you don't care for what it's doing, you can take a clear, damp brush and get really close to the edge of the mountain in front of it and lift some of that. Okay, so now it's going to end up looking a little bit more like there's some fog or something rising up out of there, which is kind of cool. I do want a few slightly darker shadows in there, but I see I've got like this one area. Kind of want to pull this down. Don't want to leave too much water there. It'll dry kind of funky. I'm going to lift a little bit more in here. It's going to end up being fairly light, I think. Okay, let's get a little slightly more saturated paint. Oh, that is way too green. All right, that's good. I was testing it. I just can't fit all of this on screen. Whoop, grabbed that from the wrong puddle. That's fine. I think I might have a little too much water on my paper still. It's kind of nice because as your palette dries, you can use some of the drier area and make a more saturated version of the color you've been working with. Ooh. Just over here mixing on the side. I'm gonna dot some of that darker color, maybe a little bit more blue, more red. It's not exactly the same color everywhere. It's just got variations of that, those three colors I've been using. Okay. think I'm gonna lift a little bit here and there. Being real careful right next to the edge of that mountain. You know, I don't think I want it actually that light all the way down. So I think there's going to be some areas that I'm just going to not have that lighter area. Let's see, let's make it a little darker. Right back here. Oop. Just getting more dry area of my palette from some of those colors. A little variation. Maybe not so much towards the edge. Let's see, maybe it goes this way just a little bit. I don't know why I have like 3 brushes in my left hand right now. Alright, so I'm going to use this one again to soften the edge because I can see as it's drying that it's going to be maybe a little too much of a hard edge where I'm going to end up adding trees and stuff. So I'm doing that process of lifting, wiping, cleaning my brush off, and maybe this mountain dried a little bit hard over there too. I'm going to soften that. And in this area, I think I'm going to soften it just a hair down this way. Okay, so that's already dry, so there's still things you can do to lift areas you don't care for. But that phthalo blue will often stain, so you're never going to get like the phthalo blue off, but it will lighten it at least. Okay, so I'm looking at my photo, trying to see if there's anything else I want to do. I think I want to make a little bit more of a hard edge right here. Okay, and I want some of this to fade into the layers I've already done. So I'm going to soften those edges with a clean, damp brush. Okay. I think this is distracting from my center of interest, so I'm just going to glaze over this with some of that background color from over there. soften that with a clean, damp brush. Those white highlights are fun, but towards the end you can decide which ones are actually a little bit distracting and which ones are cool. I'm going to zoom out here. Okay, so using that brush, I'm going to soften a little bit of this here and there, making some hard edges and some softer edges. I think I may glaze a little bit over the top edge along here. It looks a little disconnected. I'm going to add some of that color as another layer in spots. Not the whole thing, just here and there. Okay, so this is a pretty good spot. I'm going to have to let it dry before I do that glaze I was talking about, but I hope that gave you a good idea of how to soften some areas and this, like, the thinking process that goes on of, like, where do I want some emphasis on this line and where do I want some hard edges and some soft edges. But keep an eye on it as it dries. You may want to dab here and there. If you start, like over here, it was kind of creeping in on this this other mountain. But yeah, all right. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.